it's just as important to say no to deals and be careful about what you say no to as it is to what you say yes to. It happens that I actually think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
But, if I hold on to that, that mentality, then okay, well, how much longer do I go before I buy something?
Yeah.
I don't know. Sellers don't set prices. Buyers do.
Yeah.
And, I thought for sure it was worth X, and here's why, and here's our current financials, and right, I understand today's lending environment as well as anybody, and it seemed like I know what the sales price of this should be, and it was such a painful reminder as well that no, buyers are not willing to pay that.
Listen, all you New Yorkers.
Peter Hungerford. This is an exciting podcast. I feel like we're big fans of you, Peter. We've had the pleasure of getting to know you a little bit over the last couple of years. We've been calling you nonstop. You tell us to stop calling. Please text.
That never happens. I've never told a broker to stop calling me. Not once in my entire career.
Yeah, I made that up. But 3,000 plus units and counting. I won't go through your whole resume, but it is impressive. But I think the main question we wanted to ask was, what's it like to live on Staten Island?
Oh, man. You just got done telling me you weren't throwing me any curveballs. And you're
King
going to
of Staten
start
Island,
off
right here.
And you're going to start off with a borderline insult.
Before you answer that, Peter was kind enough to bring in Redbreast, which is from Cork in Ireland. So he's a man after my own heart. We're getting some nice photos here.
This episode is sponsored by Redbreast.
Seeing Mitchell drink whiskey is always a fun thing. So hopefully still awake at the end of the episode.
What happens after that?
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.
Sláinte. That is smooth.
I can't down like you guys. I like to do it slowly.
So that's
Nice
the
and spicy.
15 year, right?
Nice and spicy. I like
Spicy. That is good. So that is so anyway, Staten Island.
No, I'll answer your question.
Yes.
I don't need to hide from any particular questions.
Own it. That's what I like.
So I fell in love with a girl from Staten Island, and her mother and her family live in Staten Island. So that's how I ended up there. The real estate's cheap. I love my house. We put in a pool last year. There's not many people that live in the 5 boroughs that can say they have a pool in their backyard, but I have one. And, we may be considering a move at some point in time, but we have 4 young children, and we love our space and our driveway. And so it works for us. There's a balance. My wife actually works in Queens, so she commutes to Queens every day. Nice. I commute to Manhattan, but our kids go to school in Brooklyn. I drop them off on my way into Manhattan. Again, it works for us. It's absolutely atypical, so I understand why you might, point at it and say, what is wrong with you? But as you guys know or could guess, I spend a lot of my time on the phone too from my position in this market. And so, I put 25,000 miles on my car in the last year, and I don't know how many minutes, but, 1 million minutes on my phone. And that's how, my family makes Staten Island work for us.
Love it. Mitch, you want to dive in?
Yeah, so big headline news, your recent acquisition of the portfolio.
Might be over 3,000 units now with the
Should bump you to nearly 4, eh?
725 unit acquisition, and that's just part of the portfolio that we're purchasing. We're closing on another 600-ish in August.
Wow.
So we're excited. We understand there's a very difficult market. Oh my God, lending, borrowing against any piece of real estate right now is a bear.
Well, when we went for lunch with you a couple months ago, you were obviously trying to line up the financing for this portfolio. I remember you saying how challenging that was.
Yeah, incredibly challenging. Still to this moment challenging. I can't speak to what we haven't closed on yet, but we ended up closing on fully occupied multifamily apartment buildings, elevators in Brooklyn and Upper Manhattan with a bridge lender. In what world does that make sense? Wow. I don't know, but that is how illiquid the lending environment is today. There are just, more excuses from lenders than I know what to do with about, who's lending on what and why. And even in our case where, myself and my capital partners are putting down 40%, down payment, it's like still finding a lender who actually has the money to lend has been incredibly challenging.
The leverage was pretty low, right? 54 million, so 54%.
Yeah, there's a nuance to the
Okay.
first package that we, so like I don't look at it exactly that way. Yeah, the leverage looks even lower on our initial purchase. That's just like, again, that's just a nuance I can't really speak to because it has to do with the second closing.
Okay.
But the bottom line is just like, even just for a standard 60/40, sort of leverage commercial real estate purchase where there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the real estate, it's actually cash flowing. Still, we had so much trouble finding a lender.
So what's the business plan?
The business plan is we bought incredibly cheap bricks. We think we're going to be, a better manager, hopefully, than the last folks. Not to disparage them in any way. We're an owner operator. They were not. And
You're
so
hands-on.
so we expect to, increase collections. We expect to improve the profit margin. And we certainly, have a few other ideas on how to improve revenue. Cell towers, better management of the parking, things like that. And then, of course, maybe one day interest rates go down. I don't know. It's not like our primary bet or thesis, but, the expectation is that, whether it be Fannie and Freddie supporting the market more in the future or the Fed supporting the market in the future, our expectation is that at some point liquidity in the lending environment will come back, and that'll be a big, boon for us as well. And in the meantime, we bought, at a price point that we feel very comfortable with, and we can comfortably cash flow for a long time.
It's just funny you're talking about buying like close to 1,000 units, and it's the ancillary extras that you can charge, like parking, cell towers. Like that's literally the last stone left
That
unturned.
by itself, doesn't like move the needle for us, but it's part of the story. And there's a lot of, individual things like that when you add them all up and you say, okay, this is in our control. There's 24 roofs here we're buying. There's not a single cell tower or Dish Network is kind of like the hot hand for roofs right now. There's not a single one in this portfolio. Why? Like we're buying the tallest buildings in Washington Heights, Broadway towers. Why are there no towers on those? It doesn't make sense.
So that's low hanging fruit for you to come in and
It's just an example of where I think there's an efficiency that's not being looked at right now. That because we're buying at such a great basis, that like we're gonna focus on that. We're gonna do that part of the business right, and we really like making bets on things that we control. I don't control interest rates. That's not what this bet is about. It happens to be the case that interest rates are probably going to improve sometime soon. But that's more like a bonus. In the meantime, we're going to get paid to be a lender.
So how do you go from being you obviously started out with no units and then you started building your
Zero.
portfolio, and you did it the old fashioned way. So how do you ramp up to be in a position where you can take down a portfolio like that?
I don't know. Some of it is luck, must be. Some of it is being careful about what I bet on. I just, I said it a minute ago, but I remind myself every day I don't bet on things I don't control. So I'm sort of a good old fashioned control freak in that way. I can control leasing, I can control construction, I can control operations at the building, and that's what we really focus on. I don't think we're the greatest property manager in the world, but I think we're pretty good, and I think that's something that we add value to in any particular transaction, and so that's something I've focused on for many years. I always felt like, okay, so capital is not going to be my competitive advantage, but my operations and every piece of it that goes into it is something I can control, and it's something that I can be good at. And so how do I leverage that? How do I use that as part of my sales pitch, and how do I use that in deals to improve? Like, I'm not interested in doing a deal that's a Walgreens single tenant triple net lease deal. That's not interesting to me. There's no edge there. Somebody whose capital is their competitive advantage, that's who should be doing that deal. And so I've just been super careful and hyper focused on making bets with my limited time and my limited capital on things I control.
Yeah, you seem like you have great discipline in that respect. And I imagine people call you all the time. Brokers call you every day, trying to sell you the deals, and you keep disciplined. Not
Trying to distract
it's,
you.
it's easy to buy everything, right? You have to be focused and stick to your.
Yeah, no, I think I think it is. It's like it's just as important to say no to deals and be careful about what you say no to as it is to what you say yes to. You know, when I do a deal, okay, as a sponsor, I'm typically paid last. Everybody else gets paid first, right? The mortgage gets paid first, the pref equity gets paid first, whoever put in the biggest check is getting paid first. I only get paid last if I did a great job.
Yeah.
So because of that, I'm 10 times more careful about how am I spending my time on a transaction, because if I bet, let's say 3 or 4 years of my life and time on a transaction, but I'm paid last, whew, that's like I'm betting a lot, right? I'm like going all or nothing. And that's how promote structures work these days. And so that's how I try to think about the world. Really careful about the bet that I'm making with my time, which quite frankly is why I always like there's more in common here than anything else, right? You guys think all day long, every day about how do you spend your time and which transactions to spend your time on.
Yep.
Ironically, that's like literally exactly how I think about them.
Interesting.
You actually have or had your own brokerage, right? Out the gate, didn't you start a brokerage?
I did
after?
out of college. That's how I learned the business. I learned it, starting with leasing. That's like how I fell in love with apartment buildings. Actually, great, sort of like active issue going on right now with Saul Goldman, his portfolio maybe being, in question a little bit. But that's how I cut my teeth. I convinced that leasing department to give us their rental listings, which they just hated all brokers, like notorious for hating all brokers. But I successfully convinced them to give us a shot and let us rent their apartments, and we made a ton of money doing that. But that's how I fell in love with apartment buildings on this island and realized okay, I might not ever witness the 60s and the 70s again where I can, buy apartment buildings for $1 as long as I pay the tax bill like Saul Goldman did. So I may not ever achieve, his heights, but this is not rocket science. Collect rent, pay bills, fix toilets, rent apartments. I know how to do all those things.
I love the way the simplicity you describe the business. You break down really simply. And
am I allowed to swear on this?
Yes.
People fuck this business up all the time, and it's easy to do so when you just don't focus on the basics.
Yeah.
It's like collect rent, pay the bills, don't over lever yourself, fix the toilets, take care of your customers, and then just sit back for 30 years and do that over and over and over again every single month. That's what I think is the key to this business. And a lot of people complicate it, right? And you don't have to look any further than hot topic, rent stabilized laws on different ways to complicate it. And there's a reason why we didn't know each other very well, 2015 to 2020, let's say. It's because I wasn't buying anything. I couldn't make sense of anything. It didn't make sense. People were complicating the business in a way that just to me didn't feel like a good way of spending my time. It's I'm going to go buy this building and hope that a certain number of people will accept my buyouts. It's I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, that's out of your control, as you're saying.
It's out of my control. It's too complicated for me. It's not that I don't know how to do it. It's that it just didn't feel like a good way for me to spend my time. And I spec my time because in deals I usually get paid last.
That's amazing discipline. So you didn't buy a building for 5 years.
I bought a couple buildings in that period of time in New York City. I was much more active outside of New York City during that period of time for this reason.
So you started your own brokerage. You really glossed over the Goldman thing, how you convinced the Goldmans to give you their portfolio to rent. But I assume it's the same skills that come into play when you're trying to raise money, when you're trying to convince an owner to sell.
It's the exact same. It's called perseverance.
Perseverance.
Yeah. No. So I actually like this Saul Goldman story. I don't think I've ever, certainly never told it live anywhere. So I still to this day have the Saul Goldman phone number, main office phone number memorized. Okay. And you guys can, it still exists. It's still out there on their signs, but it's 212-265-2280. And the reason why it's so easy to remember is because and this might be a little loud, okay, but they had the same secretary for like I don't know how many decades. She's probably not there anymore. But when we used to call, and we were like, right, this is like a cold call. I'm calling to try to get a listing.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I would sit there and literally call 212-265-2280 over and over and over again until she would put me through the leasing department. And usually she would hang up on me. But every once in a while, like I'd like, change my voice or whatever, and she'd like think it was about something real, and as opposed to a broker cold calling. And
Did an
she would
Irish
put me
accent?
through. What's that?
Did an Irish accent?
I'm sure I tried that on multiple occasions, but don't ask me for my brogue right now. We need at least 3 or 4 more of these before I take the brogue out. And so the way she would answer the phone every single time, no matter what, is not, "Hello, this is Saul Goldman Investments. How can I direct your call?" Instead, it was 2280, 2280, 2280. So anyway, so I made that phone call about 6,000 or 7,000 times, and eventually, like I didn't just get through to the leasing department, right? That was only like phase 1. Phase 2 was then I had to convince somebody in the leasing department to give us a shot, so that's that story.
So perseverance, and then you move on then to wanting to own your own buildings. You start buying buildings. What's that? 20 years ago?
Nah. 15,
16 years ago. So it was around the time that everything was falling
but
apart.
actually I started upstate with single family flips. And I realized, again, just like thinking about how do I increase my hourly rate? It's like ironic that I couldn't tell you when the last time was I had a job where I was paid like on an hourly basis, but like that's literally how I thought about the world. How do I maximize my hourly rate, and how do I scale a business to maximize my hourly rate? And this is why like apartment buildings always appealed to me, because like it's a very scalable business, and you don't have to like be the person doing every piece of it because it is simple. And so I started with the single family flips because that like I don't know felt like the most like tangible and like achievable. But I did like 4 or 5 of them, and I'm like, okay, I made money doing it, figured out some things about construction and contractors and different ways they're going to try to screw me over. And then like, this is like, 2010, 2011, it turned out to be a really good time to like buy distressed real estate. So I was already like very focused on how do I buy stuff where there's like a construction element to it, and how do I buy stuff that like there's a problem that I can fix. And, so that's really how I got sucked into not just apartment buildings, but distressed apartment buildings and apartment buildings where there was something that I could do to help turn the building around and add value. Again, even then, like I knew my competitive advantage was not going to be my checkbook. So if that's not my competitive advantage, what is it? And, so I've just taken one successful deal after another and continue to roll it into the next thing.
So operations is a big part of your business, right? That's one of your competitive advantages. You know what you're doing. And,
yeah, I mean, we have 75 employees now.
Wow.
We have an office in Rochester, an office here in Manhattan, and pretty much every dollar that we can repatriate into New York City right now, like that's what we're doing. We love the like long-term story of, okay, I don't know if this is gonna take a year to turn around, 2 years, 5 years, 8 years, like I don't know, but New York City is not going anywhere. New York City has, been the greatest city in the universe for, the last 100 years or so. And so, if I can buy buildings today and be paid to be a landlord, to sit back and wait, right? I can buy 8 caps. I can finance them at 6% or thereabouts. Then I'm getting paid to be a landlord. I'm getting paid some kind of yield on my capital, some kind of yield on my cash. And I don't know what's going to happen over that period of time. But, I just view it as more and more like either New York City goes bankrupt and I go bankrupt, or things get better and the world improves and I'm the king.
Yeah.
At least of Staten Island.
Hopefully there's middle ground there somewhere.
Hopefully.
That it's not such an all or nothing bet, but I think that's the lens that a lot of people are looking at this through. Is that it's either going. We were talking with a guy who owns a lot of homeless shelters, and he obviously is very much of the same opinion that the city owes him so much money now at this point that all his eggs are in that basket in terms of back rents and everything. So he's very much keeping an eye on whether or not the city will go bankrupt. But like that.
Oh, they're totally insolvent.
Mm-hmm.
The city is insolvent right now. But that's why I look at that and I say, okay, something has to change.
Yeah.
I don't know what, but like, right, you look at the...
That's a great point.
The rules around apartment buildings right now and how many banks that are hurting and unwilling to lend. Like, there is no lending from banks. Like, I would know there is no lending from banks on apartment buildings right now in the city. And so the implication is that either something has to change in that market, or New York City and those about to be bankrupt banks are all going to own the apartment buildings, all the apartment buildings in New York City. Now, there might be a few politicians around here that would like that scenario, but I don't think that's realistic. And so, again, I don't know what exactly is going to change. Something is going to change.
And the banks don't want to lend because they have too much exposure to stabilized
Banks don't
products.
want to lend because they have no money. The
Okay.
system is so over-levered. I was talking with Andy Albstein the other day, my attorney, I'll say my favorite attorney, and Andy was telling me that he believes like today's market is significantly worse and significantly less liquid than the great financial crisis.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big.
And
That's a big statement.
There's some other big name people in this market, maybe like another broker or two that I talk to from time to time, like, no offense, that like say the exact same thing. It's like they lived through the great financial crisis, bought buildings in GFC, were brokers for the entire time, successful brokers then, successful brokers now, and they too echo the same sentiments that like literally the liquidity crisis that we're living through right now is significantly worse than the great financial crisis.
That would suggest that the market's going to get worse from here.
It would, and I believe it's going to. And it's going to because the banks are now capitulating, and the banks are now forcing sales, and the banks are now selling paper to guys like me. I've bought one mortgage in the last 3 years. I'm about to close on my first non-performing loan that I've purchased in the last 3 years, and I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? You don't have to look any further than the Signature loan portfolio going out there. That's going to start to they're going to make waves eventually. New York Community Bank is finally starting to like capitulate and deal with their reality on their balance sheet. But in the meantime, number one and number two lenders in the multifamily market over the last 10 years, Signature and New York Community Bank, they are closed for business. They are not making loans. So, and they're not making loans because 100% of the cash that they have sitting there is required by the feds to sit right there to cover expected loan losses.
Interesting.
So their hands are tied.
Yeah, and those are not the only banks like that. I had conversations with 25 other banks through the course of trying to finance this recent portfolio purchase, which again is like bread and butter New York City multifamily. You're talking about 55 unit elevator building in Brooklyn or Upper Manhattan. You would think I would have a line of banks out the door ready to give me a 60% mortgage on that. Not one.
Sounds like a good opportunity for a new bank to come into the market. Because they'd have
debt funds.
Debt funds.
There's a line of debt funds out the door that would lend me the money. There's also a line of CMBS lenders out the door.
Yeah.
So it's not that there's zero liquidity per se.
It's just too expensive, that
but
money. Yeah.
It's very expensive money. It's very different type of money. So yes, it's like a really strange world we live in. But getting back to your point, I do think it'll get worse before it gets better because you now have banks that are either sellers themselves or are creating more sellers. So you take today's world where there's very few people lending in it, very few people buying in it, and now you're going to add more sellers to that. I mean, it doesn't take a economics PhD to like figure out what's going to happen in that scenario. Maybe the Fed's going to swoop in and save everybody. Maybe Trump's going to get elected, fire Jerome Powell, and next thing you know, interest rates are back to zero. I don't know.
But Powell's out in January anyway.
It's just like so unlikely.
Powell is done in January, right? So he's not going to rock the boat up until he exits. Anyway, that's just kind of speculating, isn't it? The interest rates going up or down a quarter point isn't that exciting to talk about.
I don't see much value to talking about politics
But
here.
Bob Knackel Hero?
Hero, yes, and great example of a big guy who would echo everything I just said.
Yeah.
It is about to get worse before it gets better.
The biggest sell-off coming in the history.
Yeah, I've heard you
Yes.
say that. Yeah.
Didn't I read
Yes.
that?
Absolutely. He wrote that article, and he's out there touting it too.
So we're excited.
Yeah, you guys should be.
We are. Yeah.
You guys like thinking about the market as from the shoes of a broker participant.
Yeah.
You guys have survived the worst of it.
Yeah.
And that's what I think. Like
It has to be. It couldn't.
The
it couldn't
number
be.
of transactions that are about to come, right, for market participants whom are price agnostic.
Yeah.
A fantastic road ahead.
Yeah, we always hear about the good old days.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
were like, Tony Soprano at the start of The Sopranos. He's
Yeah.
like, lately I've been thinking I'm like 20 years too late to the party. And like, that's really the first few years of this business was just like, everyone talks about the good days
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like how there was like multiple bidders and you move any property. But
That's
since
a fault in the human condition.
everything in the rearview mirror was
It was
rosier.
amazing.
Yeah.
And today's terrible, but oh man, remember the good old days?
But we may be saying in 20 years, I can't believe you could have bought that building for 80,000 a unit, or I was selling that building for $2 million, and now
Yes.
look at it. You know,
Well, that's why I describe. I think there's two scenarios in front of us, right? There's either that scenario, where I wish I'd hadn't only bought 3,000 units in this cycle. I wish I'd bought 30,000
Yeah.
units, or New York City's going to end up owning all the apartment buildings.
Yeah. Also, from a buyer's perspective, like you can't time the bottom of the market, so I think there should be more buyers out there right now.
That's why I
That's
focus
easy
on
for me
things
to
I
say.
can control, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think about it in the buy, right? It happens that I actually think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
But, if I hold on to that, that
Yeah.
mentality, then like, okay, well, how much longer do I go before I buy something?
Yeah.
I don't know. And like, listen, there would be some people that might be annoyed for me saying this, but like, we went into contract on the portfolio. We're, closed part of it now, closing part of it next month. We went into contract last December.
Wow.
And that's how tough the financing market was, is it took us that long to put together closing tables. It's not because we're no good at this business.
and that's someone with track record, and I know you've multiple partners involved, and everyone has,
Major track
like
record,
long
yes.
term.
No, we're partnered with like another family office here in New York that has way more units than us.
Right.
Our institutional capital partner in this transaction is like phenomenal reputation, like huge capital partner.
If there was money, you would be getting it,
Totally.
right? There's no reason
Yes.
not to. Banks
Yeah.
want to lend their money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. That's how they make money.
It is. I know it's Friday in July, and I don't want to like keep you in here. We're going to have you back in
Okay.
to hit on stuff. But a few things, selfishly, if we could ask.
Please.
We have a lot of brokers who listen to the show.
Wait, before you start, I have a selfish request. Could we have some more Redbreast?
Yes, give
Yes,
yourself a
I'll
finger.
still.
So
You're
it's not very good hospitality.
You're gonna leave me hanging, aren't you?
I have to.
But Mitch is nursing that.
No, sorry, I'm slow.
Mitch is a marathon runner, so he's like the tortoise, but he'll be there at the very end. But he'll go at his own pace.
All right, fine. Make me drink alone.
Sorry, Peter.
That's okay.
So, operations, raising money, finding the deals. What are the components of your business that we're not touching on? Obviously, the management, that's the operation.
I mean, finding the deals and executing the business plan, that's everything to me
Yeah,
personally.
Yeah.
I will usually joke I'm 50% salesman, 50% politician, and 50% landlord. Mm-hmm. And that does not add up to 100%.
How much whiskey?
Has
is
nothing
that?
to do with the Redbreast. I have a funny calculator sometimes. But yeah, no, raising money becomes easy to me when I, have a good deal and I have the ability to execute a business plan that like I know and I understand and I've done it before and I'm going to do it again, right? That sales pitch is super easy. So I spend 90% of my time on finding good deals and executing business plans. And in fact, I'm like, you guys have probably heard this from me 3 times, you two in particular, but any broker that I'm friendly with, I always remind them my list of priorities are as follows. Family comes first, always ahead of you guys. Deals I already own comes first, always ahead of you guys. Deals I have in contract comes third, always ahead of you guys. And then, if I have any time left in my day, then I like to talk to friends like you. Mm-hmm. And that really is how I structure my day and structure my life and structure my business. But if I don't find new deals, then I don't have an opportunity to create more value. And that's like, one step closer to retirement. And I'm not ready to retire because I find this game fun.
Does the phone still ring every day from brokers?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, especially after closing a deal like this and being in the headlines. Totally.
Do they have anything interesting for you, or like is there
Yeah, I
interesting
love
deals
this
coming across?
market for sure. But like one of my first questions I ask, no matter what, in this market, because again, it comes back to the same time equation that you guys have, is why are they selling?
Yeah.
It sounds like such a silly question, and like it's not relevant. Like who cares why they're selling? But the reality is it's how I manage my time. If a seller doesn't have a real reason to sell in this market, I'm not wasting my time with
So
them.
what do you want to hear in that scenario? They've got a debt maturing.
It's outside of their control.
Yeah, like some exogenous force
Yeah.
is forcing them to sell. If that doesn't exist, and because I already know, like I'm 100% certain this is a terrible time to sell.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So like,
If you hear the owner is retiring, you should just hang up and
yeah, or the
That's the
owner is like,
worst.
right, like
We're moving
nobody
to
ever
Florida.
says testing the market, right? But if you start to smell that, it's like, oh, well, if they get their number, they'll sell. Like,
Yeah.
fuck off. Like, I got better shit to do. Like, hang out with my family, operate deals I already own,
Yeah.
or address things I already have in contract.
right.
So
Yeah, you really
you got real sellers that have to sell for some reason. It could be debt maturing, it could be some family matter, it could be like an actual retirement issue, right? There's a guy out there right now who's in his 90s and he's slowly selling off his portfolio and that okay, fine, maybe that could be an interesting situation. But there has to be some real reason why somebody wants to sell in this market.
we really beat ourselves up over that question. So when we get hired in a listing, or right even before then, when we're trying to get hired, what's the motivation here in the seller? And if it's not someone you've worked with before, they're probably
they're
a
always
little bit
cagey.
guarded, and they're
Totally.
like, I don't need to sell, but it actually helps them if we control the owner under the bus a little bit in with the market, and we say to them, listen, if you really want to get activity on this, and obviously we work for you, but it may behoove you for us to say this owner needs to sell, because what it'll allow us to do is exactly what you described: get the focus of buyers today and get offers in.
Yeah.
Or just have it priced appropriately.
There's ways of tactically doing that. You don't have to completely show them everything, but I think instilling urgency in buyers that they should focus on this deal for at least an hour and see, can you get an offer?
So I'm not often a seller, but we recently went out to market with one of my properties outside of New York City, and it was a fun exercise. It didn't work out in a transaction, and partially because I don't have a reason why I need to sell. The reason why I wanted to sell was because if I could take that equity and move it here into New York City, I would like to. But it was a fun reminder that sellers don't set prices, buyers do.
Yeah.
And I thought for sure it was worth X, and here's why, and here's our current financials, and right, I understand today's lending environment as well as anybody, and it seemed like I know what the sales price of this should be. And it was such a painful reminder as well that no, buyers are not willing to pay that, so you can't sell it for that.
For the brokers listening, why did you choose the broker that you chose to sell your building? Obviously, there was competition.
You know what? Actually, we talked about this when we were at lunch.
Oh, we did.
last.
Sorry, yeah, you reminded
You know
me.
what?
Yeah, we did.
I picked the broker I thought I was going to at that time because of his local expertise.
Yeah.
We were debating, does the territory system still work?
Yeah.
Or is it more of an asset class system? Or is it more what broker has the most buyers?
Yeah, I can't claim to have spent any time thinking about that. I can just claim in this particular example where I don't normally seek to be a seller, or I'm not normally a seller. I in the course of deciding to sell, or wanting to sell anyways, a $50 million asset, I selected the broker with the local expertise.
Yeah.
Market expertise. All you brokers out there, that's what
Yeah.
Hungerford is looking for.
That's why a lot of people do that. It makes sense.
Yeah. Well, listen, we can take the Bronx as an example, because you guys know something about the Bronx, right?
Just a bit.
The Bronx is a market that not everybody is going to buy in. Not everybody wants to buy in. Not every lender wants to lend in that market. There are some lenders out there that, whoa, Brian, no way. And I'm not suggesting anyone would redline, of course, but there are some people that just don't want to lend there, just like there are some people that don't want to buy there. And so, that expertise of knowing who is actively buying there, that's worth something to me as a seller. If I want to sell something in the Bronx right now, it should be worth something to me to have a broker who knows, listen, these are the last 100 properties that traded. These are the last, 50 principals that purchased those properties. And guess what? Let's look at my phone. Yep, I know that guy. Yep, I know that guy. Yep, I know that guy.
Particularly
I know that girl.
Particularly in this market, it's a very limited buyer pool.
Yeah.
Totally. Especially in this market. I agree with that statement.
So just in closing then, and like I said, there's so much more we talk about, but it is Friday and it is the summertime, and you've got a few fingers of Redbreast already down.
Thank you very much. It's kind of you.
I know family is important to you, so I want to let you get home to them. Any predictions for the remainder of 2024?
Good question. Remainder of 2024. I mean, listen, I think New York City in particular, I'll make these statements, to New York City, since you and whoever might be listening are probably, pretty specific to New York City. I think that there's a pretty predictable seasonality to real estate transactions in New York City that, summer's really slow and boring, and people are out at their summer homes and what have you, and a lot of decision makers are just not particularly motivated to make decisions. Obviously, we're going into an election year, which I think is going to give sort of like a lot of people analysis paralysis until that decision is made on or about, the first week in November. But I think there's going to be a ton of activity, from September through December. There's a big portion of the market that is just paid based on putting dollars to work. And so there's some meaningful number of transactions that are going to occur just because whether it's a debt fund needing to lend money or, an equity fund needing to buy things, like there's a lot of transactions that have to occur before year end for that reason. I think Jerome Powell is going to give everybody, some reason, whether it be in, July or September or October, November, the subsequent meetings, reason to get excited about buying real estate again. And yeah, as I said earlier, I think banks are really capitulating and are forcing transactions wherever and however they can to create liquidity on their own balance sheets. So I think you put that all together, and it's like maybe some of that activity is really going to slow going into, until the election. But like, it's going to be a lot happening between now and the end of the year.
Good.
Exciting. We're ready for it.
We're banking on it.
Yeah,
We're going to do a deal together next year.
let's hope so.
Mark us down.
I do want to be a real estate developer when I grow up, by the way.
That
So
would
you got to get me some cheap land in the Bronx,
We're
please.
selling our land.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
You want to pitch some deals real quick? You want to take it
No
offline?
time. No time. I got to go.
He's going to take it offline. All right. Cheers, Peter.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for coming in.